here's what I would want to know, because he's right. Not what he just said is right. He's right with the data side. Everything's out there with data, right?
Yes.
I would love to, Tyler, see if you can search this while we're talking. David, leave the camera on us. I'm seeing if Tyler can find this. I would want to know.
I probably have it.
Well, if you have the data, tell us. We'd pull it up to show it. I would want to know, what is the average rate of a woman that divorces a man, her income to her, versus man to a woman? I don't know if that makes sense or not. So woman files a divorce to the man files a divorce to the woman. What's the income? Okay, I'd be just curious to know, because
income differential.
Yeah, it would be income difference. I have a friend of mine that he's been married to his wife, Rolo, for 15 years. Okay, she's a lawyer. She makes a couple $100,000 a year. He's a stay-home dad, and she's crazy about him. She would never leave him. And he has no desire to go be a career guy. He drops off the kids in the morning, makes them breakfast, packs their lunch, and he's not a softie. Like, if you looked at him, you wouldn't be like, oh, this guy's a little pansy. He's not. And then they're happily married. He's not career driven. He wants to be the soccer dad, is who he is. He's exactly what a soccer mom is, except he's a soccer dad. She's not a cook. He is, and they're happily married. And that's working out for them, right? But I also have friends who will call me and they'll say, I say, what's going on? I say, you sound like you're upset. What's pissing you off? Something's bothering you. Well, yeah, listen, man. I mean, I don't know. I'm like, finally, so let's just say we're having a conversation. They'll open up and they'll say, would it bother you if your wife made more money than you? He asked me this question, open-ended question. We're like 3-4 guys, we're talking, shooting the shit. Would it bother if your wife made more money than you? I said, why do you ask? He said, well, that's what happened with me and my wife. Just got a raise right now, and we got some fights at the house. I said, why does that bother you? Well, I feel like I have to be the one making more money. So psychologically, he couldn't accept it. So does that concept vary based on men and women? Because sometimes I see women who are stronger personalities marry a guy who is not necessarily an alpha. He's a little bit more of a chill, it's okay, nothing pisses him off. And that works out, because I think the one thing about these philosophies is, from my experience, I don't think there's anything that's an absolute truth, right? I think there's generalities and there's majority. And then you got the exception, to the rule. What would you say to that?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, the idea that that men and women are equal is a misnomer, because I think what we do is, when we talk, people throw me under the bus for this one, but I don't believe in equality, and I don't mean that in the terms of like, oh, we shouldn't all like strive to be equal. I just think that our understanding of what is equal is sort of out. It's subjective and it's obscure. It's relative to whatever the challenges are that men and women face in life. So if I wanted to get pregnant, I'm a man. I can't do that because I'm a man. So that seems very unfair and unequal between the two of us.
Well,
it just
Apple
depends
thinks
on,
you can, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, apparently so.
Apple thinks you can. Can you pull up the new emoji by Apple? Apple thinks
Yes,
you can. I don't know how.
exactly.
I haven't figured out yet, but
yeah, but
it's a painful experience.
But biologically speaking, reality, objectively speaking, there are always going to be differences between men and women, and how we define what's equality and what's justice and what's fair and what's not fair is really just dependent on what the challenge is. So if I'm flying out here on the plane and some lady says, "Can you please put my bag in the overhead because you're taller than I am and you're stronger than I am and you can put it up in the overhead?" Well, that seems very go. We're all equal. Go ahead, you do it, right? I'm not going to defend you. I don't. We're all equal today, right? No, I'm going to go, of course, pick it up and put it in there for her. But that's what I'm talking about. What's the challenge? And the challenge in this case is just simply taking your luggage and putting it in the overhead bin, right? So when we talk about equality, we need to say what's the challenge, under what parameters, what's the context that we're talking about here. So when you're talking about your friends who are, the man is sort of like the Mr. Mom, right? He's the stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
He wants to be the soccer dad or whatever else. Odds are that what does she do for a living?
A lawyer.
A lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. And what did he do before he became this, or how did they meet?
I don't think he's ever had a full-time.
Okay. Is he a good-looking dude? There's probably something that offsets.
He was.
There's probably something that offsets.
What do you mean he was?
He was very handsome. Right now he's got a massive belly and just he's got the dad bod, and he's just.
Some women find dad bods hot.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying to you. But here's the thing, though. What are you going to change about that? It's working. They're good with it, and they've been together 15 years. Are they doing something wrong? So,
But that's the anomaly.
Exception. That's
right?
what I'm saying.
That's
That is the exception to the rule. I agree with that.
So
all I'm trying to say is the one part that, Adam, I will see is, like, in the company, we have a lot of couples in the sales company. So I'll see sometimes the wife is a bigger alpha than the husband is, and he's okay with that. Like he doesn't have the insecurity of saying, I want to be the alpha. That the fact that he doesn't have that insecurity makes him an alpha. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
The fact that he's not trying to impose is like, dude, I'm so happy. And they're killing it, okay? And then you got some guys that are the alpha and the wife is supporting them, some that run together. But
that's very much an exception to the rule, because especially in blue collar couples, I mean, you're talking about somebody who makes a lot of money in a completely different socioeconomic class. You're looking at a larger whole. Women file for divorce 70% of the time, and that's the lowest estimate I have. Actually, I have higher estimates as well. And
so 3 out of 4 times, just a woman looking for the divorce.
What precipitates that is usually that woman has gone. They're blue collar workers. The woman has gone up in status as a result of a promotion or whatever, and now the guy is making less money. Or in the case of your friend here, he was never making that much money in the first place. Now your lawyer friend goes to the practice, and she's having to defer to men who are her authorities, who are her superiors, guys who are very powerful, high status guys that she has to interact with every day. Is she going to come home from that situation and go back to her soccer dad husband and say, yeah, I'm going to submit to my husband? I'm going to, are we going to suddenly come back into that traditional, conventional gender role after working 40 hours a week with guys who are much higher status than the guy that she has to come home to every day, who's changing diapers and cooking mac and cheese? So that is the power dynamic that goes along in there, because women are looking for a man that they can look up to. Women cannot look up to a man who is her equal. She's looking for a guy who makes more money than she does. She's looking for a guy who is more on top of his game as a quote-unquote dominant alpha male. She's looking for the guy who is in status-wise above herself. If there is some sort of anomaly that's going on there where she's like, oh, I'm good with it because he's a good-looking guy, I would have to say, well, what's her situation as well? So it's not just about like, okay, was he a good-looking dude, as you said he was? What is her situation? Again, money, muscles, game, and frame. So where does he fit in on those core 4 right there?
You'd probably say she's more attractive than him.
You would say so?
You would say so.
Okay. So in that case,
and he's not a porn star, so he's not packing.
Yeah,
I know where you're going to go next.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to take that into consideration, right? You have to say, okay, well, she wants to get with this guy. I mean, I know dozens and dozens of women who are actually, at least 2 of them are my clients right now, who complain that they can't find the guy who is that higher status guy. And so they have to sort of dumb themselves down. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying they feel like they have to dumb themselves down just so they can get with a guy, because more men are simply not, average women don't want to get with average men. They want the guy who they can look up to and admire. And from an average American perspective, like blue collar workers, when that woman is elevated to a different position, that's what precipitates divorce.
So you're familiar with Gloria Allred. You know who Gloria Allred is? Okay.
The attorney.
Yes.
So, sometimes, we are sold a philosophy by somebody who has had dramatic life experiences that we haven't had.
Right.
But they impose their philosophies onto you, and you kind of sit there and say, I'm going to buy that. But you shouldn't buy that, because it may not work for your life. But because the other person is such a better salesperson, it's so much emotion into it, you buy into it, right? You got to be very careful which philosophies of people you buy. So I remember when I interviewed her, Gloria Allred. We're in her office. I walk in, and she's a perfect, like for people that don't know who Gloria Allred is, how do you define who she is? She's a Michael Jordan of sexual harassment lawsuits, right? Can we say that? Yeah. And
attractive older woman, accomplished.
By the way, I had the most incredible time sitting down with her when the interview was done, because things got heated. When the interview was done, I said, can I hug you? She says, you know what, Patrick? All you have to do is ask. That's the key.
Yep.
I'm like, okay. So she gave me the biggest hug. We laughed it out. But I pushed her. She pushed me. I said, look, Gloria, you talk about feminism and women's rights and all this stuff. How many people you got working here? A lot. Why is it that the front desk clerk was a woman, but all your partners' pictures on the wall, they're all men? Well, are you? How about you, Patrick? Are you not a bigot? It was like such an interesting dynamic. But then I said, I want to find out about this lady. When I looked at her documentary, looked at study stuff on her, when she was in Cancun, do you know the story about what happened to her in Cancun in Mexico? So when she was younger, in her early mid-20s, very attractive girl. She goes to a doctor. She meets a doctor. Doctor says, "Let's go back to my practice. I want to show you my office." In the office, he rapes her. Okay, and she keeps it to herself for a while, but she creates this level of anger towards men, right? So later on, she gets married to this man. Then they get a divorce. I think after she gets a divorce, he ends up committing suicide. The guy kills himself, her first husband. And then second husband, she gets married. They get a divorce. She keeps the last name but sues the hell out of him. And you saw what happened to her daughter. Her daughter is now kind of similar doing what she's doing. I don't know if you're following she's following her footsteps. Similar personality, strong personality. And she's out there saying, independent women, independent women, independent women, independent women. And women are like, she's right, she's right, she's right. And it may work for some, but some actually do want to have a family, do want to have, do want to have a husband, do want to stay, build something together with them. How do you differentiate between, somebody who is selling a bag of goods that maybe worked for her because she had a painful experience? How do you process that? How do you get somebody who is listening to this saying, well, she's right, versus saying, I don't know if that philosophy is going to work for me long term?
It's very difficult to make a rational argument with people who are like seeded and steeped in emotionalism. And anger is definitely an emotion, and resentment and regret, revulsion. There's all kinds of different emotions that go along with that. So I can be the most rational guy in the world and say, here's the statistics, here's the dynamics, here's just the dots that I'm connecting.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change that person's mind if she's having an emotional argument and I'm having a rational argument, because we're talking past each other. Most people, when they have a conflict of interest, or they have like, oh, you believe in a philosophy, and I'm like, no, I don't believe in a philosophy. I believe in empirical data. Here it is. The only way they can win that rational argument is by converting it into an emotional argument, and that's in a nutshell kind of what happens when you're trying to relate red pill awareness, when you're trying to relate the kind of material that I do to people who are very ego invested into, like, their personalities are dependent on that belief set. So unless they get to a point of crisis, unless they get to a point of really kind of desperation, or they have, through some miracle, they have some sort of insight about things, you're really probably not going to change their minds about it. The best you can do is to present, pick your battles, ask, lead the witness, right? Ask pertinent questions at the time when those topics arise. But as far as like when we're talking about like this cultural narrative of the strong, independent woman right now, it's practically a brand. We've been talking about the strong, independent woman since 1970, since Gloria Steinem. Okay, and
why is that a broken philosophy? Why is that a broken philosophy? It's
a broken philosophy for several reasons.
Some people swear by it.
Independent of what? What are women independent of? Men. They're independent of men's provisioning. So when we go back, remember I told you how everything goes back to the micro?
Yeah.
The micro level is this. For women, women's mating strategy is hypergamy, okay? And I mean that on two fronts. It's dual. It's not just one. Like a lot of people mistake hypergamy as, oh, well, women marry up. It's not just about that. Women also are looking for short-term sexual genetic benefits. They want the hot guy in the foam cannon party in Cancun on spring break. They want the hot fireman that arouses them and gets their blood boiling. And then they want the guy who's also, like I said, attraction, who is the guy who's a good long-term security prospect. So it's cads versus dads. That's kind of like the dynamic that women have to choose. They have to find the best fit between those two things. In today's society, really since 1970, we have developed a social order that has told women, you don't need to worry about long-term security. We've got no-fault divorce. We've got child support laws. We've got the Duluth model of feminism. We've got more women in the workplace. And just go on down the line of all the benefits that women have accrued since the time of the sexual revolution. All of those point to one thing, which is long-term security for women. So when we're talking about like abortion on demand, that's a fail-safe for bad reproductive choices. That is the function of abortion, is to say, you know what? Well, he's not a good prospect for the future, but this guy is, and so therefore we have that option. Just having that option, and that is exactly why women will fight tooth and nail to keep abortion legal. That's number one.
You think that's the reason?
Absolutely, that is the function of it. So women will say, well, it's because of bad decision. What else is it? I mean, is it bad philosophy? Is it bad religion? Is it bad whatever?
So let's process that.
What is the purpose? What is the latent purpose?
So what you're saying is if a girl hooks up with an NFL player, she'll keep the baby, but if she hooks up with a neighbor because one night she was alone and he came. He was a school teacher, regular guy. She may abort that baby, but keep the NFL.
And
that's what you're saying?
And it's exactly why you have no seat at the table when we start talking about abortion laws. You don't have a uterus, and therefore you don't get to. You don't have a say.
You know what NFL trained on that, by the way? Just a side note. NFL trained that every time you have sex with a condom, flush the
condom. It was the NBA that did that too.
I mean, now it's everybody.
Have you seen what happened